The quest for answers continued. However, I had no idea where to begin, and doubted whether it was possible once again to create a new me, someone completely free from worries, and with even a bit more self-confidence than I had already gained. While I seemed to overcome these challenges for the most part by tackling them head-on with confidence, I found myself in a stressful, yet loving environment. Small victories, whether it was striking up a conversation with a stranger or being more assertive with someone who didn't expect it from me, brightened my life. I left my comfort zone as often as I could, sought more challenges, and it seemed worth it at that time. I began to realize that there was more to life than I had ever imagined. For the second time in a row, new people entered my life, new career opportunities arose, and my relationships improved, my capacity to learn, my creativity, even my financial situation at one point. But then, a shift occurred, something that forms the basis of this entire book. The extreme drive, my complete focus on positivity, not allowing myself to be down, led to a backlash that I didn't see coming. The most beautiful moments of my life suddenly turned, but why did this happen? After months of excitement about my new life, full of opportunities, I fell deeper than I had ever fallen. In a short period, I experienced so many setbacks that I could no longer hold on to the positive mindset I had developed. My world seemed like a tower collapsing. This was a dark period in my life. How could this happen? What had I done wrong? As painful as this thought is, it was then that I realized that life is not just about being happy or at peace, but also about acknowledging and respecting the conflicting feelings we encounter on our journey. It gives you the opportunity to explore and appreciate these feelings. Despite what I know now, I still wonder if I would do it again because I reached a point where I no longer recognize myself. Past and future ceased to exist. Truth became a lie, and fake news became reality and vice versa. I became afraid of what was real and what wasn't. Had I gone too far? Was I lying to myself? Or was I desperately trying to be someone other than myself? There were so many things I wanted to know before embarking on this journey. The harsh truth I had to learn the hard way is that life is not just about love, compassion, or other positive emotions. Negative emotions have their reason for existence, and it was my mistake to look away from them, not wanting to overcome them, denying them, or simply avoiding them. I didn't want to feel what I felt. Everything seemed like a great success, but only for a certain period, as if the expiration date of my happiness had passed. It was at that moment that I decided to sort everything out and look at it from a distance. I had to and would discover why this was happening. Chapter 2. Personal. Let's delve deeper into who I was as a child, my background, upbringing, and personality before embarking on this journey. Allow me to take you back to my early years when I was growing up in a loving family where my parents were always there for me. I cherish countless beautiful memories from that time, especially up until my 10th year of life when I could enjoy carefree moments and play to my heart's content with my brother and friends. I was surrounded by people who supported and encouraged me, and I always felt safe and secure. It's incredible how my parents sometimes bent over backward to ensure that their children lacked nothing, despite their sometimes overly protective nature, trying to shield us from the dangers of the world. Dangers as they saw them, and mostly rightfully so. I truly had everything I could wish for, and enjoyed a sense of freedom. We had a garden to play in, love around us, security, support, and all of this while being part of an average middle-class family. We barely had any worries. As a child, for instance, I never noticed how my parents sometimes had to make ends meet towards the end of the month. Even in terms of finances, we were shielded from concerns or uncertainties as children. We didn't notice a thing. I could simply be a child, as it should be, without worrying about the troubles of adults. Now, looking back on all those years and analyzing my life through the lens of adulthood, I see countless moments and milestones that have contributed to the person I am today. While such insight wasn't necessary back then, as a child, you simply live your life, learn from experiences, and continue through trial and error. Now, I understand that the love and care of my parents were invaluable and significantly contributed to the person I've become. I now better comprehend the origins of my kindness, but also where my insecurities and introverted traits originate, in my upbringing, family background, and even genetic characteristics. My brother played, and still plays, a significant role in my life, and I continue to look up to him. He served as my role model, and everything he did I wanted to do as well. However, as I reached my teenage years, something began to change. My rebellious side started to emerge, and I began retreating more into my own world. While I did well in school, I began asking more questions. Why did I have to learn so much that I thought I would never use? Why wasn't there more time for relaxation? Why couldn't the school system be made more enjoyable? From a young age, I observed that not everyone was asking these questions. It seemed like most people just accepted that this was the world they lived in, without worrying too much about whether they could bring about changes in the school system or elsewhere. As the years went by, my circle of friends also began to change. I spent more time with boys who were just as rebellious as I was, seeking more excitement in their lives or not taking the whole school thing too seriously. At one point, a teacher even told my mother that I was a good boy, but maybe needed to find different friends. This was a pattern that repeated itself during my youth. As a quiet and introverted person, I often came across as someone without a strong opinion, someone easily influenced by others, which often led people to take care of me and offer advice, even when I knew more than I let on. It was as if I appeared foolish or naive, purely based on my body language and the silence that surrounded me. I vowed to write a book someday about the gap between being introverted and extroverted, but that's another topic. What's important is that these experiences from my childhood have contributed to the person I've become. They've taught me to think critically and strive for improvement, even if it means swimming against the current at times. Now, many years later, I'm acutely aware of the differences between introverted and extroverted personalities. Throughout the years, I came to realize that my silence and powers of observation didn't mean I lacked strong, independent thoughts. On the contrary, I developed a deep inner world where I stored my ideas and contemplations. It was as if my introverted nature allowed me to view the world from a different perspective, gain profound insights, and understand challenging situations. However, the outside world often seemed not to understand this, and that was sometimes hard to bear. I began to understand that my introverted traits, such as my tendency for self-reflection and deep conversations, were indeed valuable assets. They granted me the ability to listen to others with empathy, solve complex problems, and build valuable relationships. Instead of suppressing my true nature, I began to embrace and appreciate it as an essential part of who I was. Now I understand that both introverted and extroverted traits are valuable, and we're all unique in our personal development. Just as my childhood experiences helped me find my own path and embrace who I truly am. It taught me that it's essential to be authentic, regardless of what the outside world expects of you. It's regrettable that I didn't realize this as a child. These insights only came to me when I was already in my 30s. Now, let's return to the past. When I was 9 years old, I also became a big brother with the birth of my sister. She too has always held a special place in my heart. Our age differences never stopped us from forming a strong bond. From the moment she was born, I felt a deep responsibility to care for her or protect her. Yet, I must admit that there were moments in my life, especially during my teenage years, when I wasn't always present as I should have been. My own decisions and search for my identity sometimes led me down a path where I had to distance myself from my role as a big brother. But this didn't apply only to my sister. The same held true for my brother and parents. I was too preoccupied with my own challenges, grappling with my own demons, and trying to find my way through the labyrinth of adolescence. But despite these absent moments, our family bond remained unbreakable. Often my sister understood my struggles the most, and grew up to be a beautiful, understanding, and forgiving woman. Now, as an adult, I cherish the time I get to spend with my family and still look forward to our many Sunday gatherings. I have a busy life now, and it's sometimes challenging to be present all the time. But knowing that there is one or more places where you can turn to, that's something I would wish for everyone. My great passion, and something I seemed to excel at as a child, was drawing. While I engaged in various sports as a child, drawing was more than a hobby. It was my first passion from an early age. With my family, the bond is now stronger than ever before, and I am determined to be the son, brother, and now father that my family deserves, regardless of where life individually takes us. We've all experienced our ups and downs and have regrets, But I realize that each of us is on our own journey, and even the most peculiar decisions on my life's path have shaped me into who I am now. This thought is one I'll never let go of because it's the truth, and once you see the truth, you can't deny it. My teenage years were not easy. As a small, skinny, quiet, and quite shy boy, I had the choice to stand my ground or retreat further into my shell, often opting for the latter. I became quieter and more introverted, less inclined to share what was on my mind with others. Life had completely changed. While in my earliest childhood, I could always turn to my parents for anything, whether for a chat, a board game, or help with my schoolwork. The world within the school walls suddenly turned into a place where every word had to be carefully weighed, where you had to be mindful of your behavior, your attire, your toughness, and much more. All human values seemed to have been thrown overboard. I found myself in a fictional world that had nothing to do with love. The contrast was enormous. Where had that carefreeness gone? For my parents, we, the children, always came first. They would have even set aside their own needs to provide us with everything a child loves. But beyond the walls of my parental home awaited an entirely new world, one that seemed much darker than I had imagined. Despite having many friends and still having a great time at home, my perspective on the outside world began to change. You could even call it a sad realization. I quickly noticed that I was retreating more and more during this period, as if I were building walls and adopting a defensive posture toward the unfamiliar world. Much of this change had to do with the fact that I moved from a local school in my own municipality, where I knew everyone and everything, to a school in the city of Ulst. Nothing was the same anymore. Nothing was innocent. This was now a place for the big boys. Playtime was over. Despite my own identity and thoughts, I still allowed myself to be influenced by my schoolmates. Not that I copied their behavior, but I often seemed to follow their path, the choices they made. I remember vividly that during the first months at that new school, I wondered what I was actually doing there. This was not the school, not the field of study I wanted. It didn't suit me. But why was I there then? I used to study modern mathematics, and a year later, I suddenly found myself in the world of electronics, electricity, and mechanics, which I knew nothing about and had no interest in. My eyes opened, and I felt compelled to follow my friends because otherwise, I would be alone, in a different school, without familiar faces, without anything familiar. So, my choice of this school was entirely based on fear, not personal interest or ambition. The worst part is that during that time, I probably deluded myself into thinking I would like that field of study or that it would pay off in the future. Fears infiltrated my life without me being aware of it. I wasted 2 years of my life there, only to realize that I had to return to a school where more intellectual work was done than manual labor, because that was who I was and what I enjoyed doing. I've always had a lot of respect for people who can work with their hands, or practice a craft, but this didn't represent who I was. I was a creative boy who was good with computers and mathematics. I don't often look back on this period of my life, but if I were to, I could probably list dozens of situations where I was actually following someone else's path, either guided by my own fears or driven by my need for a role model. Now, 30 years later, I realize that even when everything seemed great, it also created polar opposites. The most beautiful period in my life, when I followed my 3-year-older brother in everything he did, asked him for advice, mimicked him, let him make decisions, was now reversed. I now realize that I never really had to make decisions because there were my parents and brother for that. I could trust them with peace of mind, knowing that they would make the right choices because they were older, wiser, simply my protectors. This sounds beautiful, and it was, but it had enormous consequences for my life, to this day. At school, I now looked for new role models to guide me, and I also relinquished my responsibilities there, as a follower, searching for someone or a group to show me the way. This was the flip side of the coin. I never really learned to think independently because it was so easy to follow someone, like my brother or my parents, who had my best interests at heart from day one. What was first the most beautiful in my life later turned into one of my biggest challenges. What was their greatest gift, for which I am still incredibly grateful, resulted in a lack of initiative, a lack of independence, and a low self-esteem that was shaped by this. But why did it take so long for me to understand this? Why do we often only see the cause of a problem after the experiences have already happened? The question has already answered itself. These experiences had to happen. It's as simple as that. I could never grow as a person now without certain experiences from the past. These are the polar opposites that are necessary for growth, awareness, and evolution. What goes up must come down. I can only advise people to be aware of this. I certainly didn't see it coming. In my so-called positive period years later, at the start of this whole awakening process, I was constantly focused on becoming more conscious of every minute, every moment. Whether someone was rude to me or trying to take advantage of me, I kept smiling and forgiving them as I continued my journey with a clear conscience and optimism, as if nothing had happened. It made my life much easier, without worries, without all the internal debates that never occurred and never will happen after an unpleasant confrontation with another person. To this day, I still can't believe that there was a time when I judged people in an instant, without ever considering that that might be the reason why people judged me too. That it might be true that there is such a thing as bad karma or a bad reflection. But when we take a step back and look at ourselves, that's how we have all learned to think, convinced that there are no consequences for the thoughts or judgments we make or have made in the past. What's even worse is that many of us actually think it would be foolish to think differently, that you have to be a fool to believe in something spiritual or otherworldly. Okay, but where did it go wrong? What happened to humanity? Why do we not even know what our feelings are for or how they work? We are taught to underestimate the power of our thoughts and human capabilities, that we live in a limited universe, that our gut feeling means nothing, and that people should not believe in magic. That's the world we're dealing with, but why do we do that? Ignoring a gut feeling or genuine emotions and then replacing them with artificially manufactured fake emotions, is that better? Where and when did we stop believing in the wonders of life, as if we're not walking around in beautiful bodies that can be trained, evolved, and even healed as we walk upside down on a spinning sphere in space? We have undoubtedly lost a big part of ourselves, of who we truly are, as we grow up. But is this how it's supposed to be? Is this just a part of our human growth, of getting older, or does it have something to do with something collective, like our evolution? It's up to us to discover who we really are. Maybe we need to face how much has gone wrong with humanity and the mindset we teach to children. Or maybe we can simply let go of some old beliefs about ourselves that are no longer accurate. The earth is a beautiful place, but the world we've created urgently needs improvement. How many people do you know in your environment who have full control over their emotions and thoughts? How many friends do you have who keep attracting the same kind of problems in their lives? Undoubtedly, you can list many positive qualities of our fellow humans, but if we're being realistic, we have to admit that the vast majority still doesn't seem to be truly conscious of life, or they at least don't show it. When I was around 25 years old, I started questioning a lot of things, again about people's behavior, my role in society, my destiny, the purpose of life, and so much more. For some reason, I kept coming across the law of attraction around that time, a theory that states you can manifest your dreams into reality by believing in them, by trusting that your dreams can come true when you believe in them strongly enough. Yes, it sounded far-fetched to me at first too, but it seemed to be a real hype, and I could use some positivity at that moment, so I gave it a chance and started experimenting with it. I still can't say whether I was trying to debunk this theory, or just curious to see what it could mean for my life. Nevertheless, it caught my attention because I could use some more changes in my life. Hours, weeks, and months went by as I watched various documentaries, read book reviews, and sifted through both positive and negative comments from people. I even bought a few books and DVDs. The idea of regaining control over the events in my life was so enticing that I fully immersed myself in it. At one point, I even decided to create my own dream book, a personal book with photos of all my goals and dreams, as recommended in one of the many books I had read. It might sound ridiculous, but I had pictures of a new PC, a professional music studio with logos of record labels because I had been producing music for almost 15 years at that point. Pictures of places I wanted to visit, perfect teeth and a healthy body, a quit smoking sign, a finished book cover, and so much more. I was very skeptical about it and even laughed at it for a while, but partly out of desperation, I decided to give it a try and waited while continuing with my daily life. As described in multiple books about the law of attraction, it is recommended to look at your dream book daily. But I actually didn't. Maybe I opened my dream book a few times in the first year, but that was it. My goals and biggest dreams actually remained constantly in my thoughts, and that's why I never really felt the need to look at pictures that had little to do with me. Hope and despair can do strange things to a person, and that was actually the only reason why I was willing to try something like this. I opened up to the idea that there was more going on, and tried my best to apply the tips and tricks they taught me, and finally started to believe in it somewhat, all while being fully aware of what I was doing, or so I thought. When you watch a whole series of videos on a topic that hits you in a sensitive spot, it's perfectly normal for someone to adopt a certain mindset. Call it indoctrination, brainwashing, or even education. It's all about your personal judgment about a particular idea being influenced, whether you're conscious of it or not. Of course, this depends on how open you are to influence and how vulnerable you are. The more vulnerable you are, the more likely you are to accept answers that have the potential to help you. But I'm not a naive person, and I certainly don't believe everything the thousands of online internet gurus say. Ultimately, I still rely on my intuition, which will tell me whether certain information is correct, partially correct, or simply unimportant. I tried to approach this with a clear mind, without judgment, and with the benefit of the doubt. Because let's be honest, wouldn't most people want a shortcut to their dreams? I know we've reached a point where we no longer need to explain or even apologize for watching spiritual or controversial documentaries or reading new theories about how our minds and thoughts really work, because the most successful people on earth openly talk about it. This taboo has now been broken, but it was unthinkable when I was young. After all these years, it still feels somewhat awkward to talk about something spiritual. I hope that changes soon, because I still keep so much information to myself. There are still so many people ready to label you in a fraction of a second, mocking, without realizing that what you have to say could also benefit them. To those closed-minded and ignorant individuals, all I can say is that if less than 1% of humanity becomes famous, recognized, rich, popular, or simply an inspiration to millions of others, and if that same group of people shares their knowledge on how to achieve your personal goals and dreams, you might want to pay more attention to what they have to say. And I don't mean just a simple quote. Many people complain about the rich and famous while ignoring, denying, or even ridiculing the advice or guidelines of those very successful entrepreneurs, celebrities, artists, and so on. After applying the law of attraction for a while, like many people who become interested in this theory, it began to bother me that it wasn't working as it should. Nothing was really turning out as I wanted, and I kept struggling, desperately trying to apply this theory to improve my daily life. At that point, it almost became an obsession for me. I did see some changes in my life that had definitely occurred from applying this law of attraction, but not everything happened the way I had envisioned and visualized it. Something seemed to be missing, or was I going crazy? Here are some events that turned out completely differently despite weeks of daily visualization while lying in bed in a peaceful state and trying to summon the emotions associated with the desired experience. Example 1. I visualized arriving at my workplace in a brand new Ferrari, and during these visualizations, I tried to feel the steering wheel, the acceleration, and the emotions of freedom, success, and accomplishment. At that time, I was a bus driver with no savings, no possessions, and living in a rental house. How did this turn out? Believe it or not, a few months later I was driving a Porsche, and I kind of experienced what I had imagined. Arriving at my workplace in style sounds great, right? But that wasn't the case at all. Everything turned out differently, to the point where it was downright embarrassing. I couldn't afford that Porsche in the long run. There was an issue with the registration. It wasn't a Ferrari. It wasn't new but a used car. Many technical problems surfaced. There were inspection issues. And the only reason the Porsche ended up at my workplace was that the mechanic who normally worked on the buses was trying to fix these technical problems. In every way, it was the opposite of what I was trying to manifest. It resulted in a financial disaster, left me feeling naive and disappointed. It was humiliating. And some viewed me as someone with their head in the clouds. In short, it was a nightmare. This purchase was one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made. It felt like God himself spat in my face at that moment. Like everything had come true, that I could indeed manifest something through visualizations, but with a glitch. Example 2. As a child, I dreamed of winning the lottery just like many of us. As long as I can remember, I fantasized about the things I would do or buy, who I would give money to, the type of house I would live in, and which countries I would visit. Besides my own material dreams, I also always had the desire to give my family financial freedom, just as much as for myself. My parents weren't retired yet, and it was my dream to give them so much money that they never had to work again. In my visualizations, I saw myself sitting at a large table with my family, handing each of them a sealed envelope with a check inside. I conjured up the emotions I was sure each of them would experience when opening that envelope. I knew exactly who would shed tears, who would cheer, and who would be speechless and in shock. This was so close to my heart that during these visualizations, I even felt tears welling up due to the intense emotions I was experiencing. I fully surrendered to it. But then, for months, nothing happened. I had long forgotten about the visualizations and just continued with my life. At that time, my girlfriend and I had decided to have a child, and she became pregnant. We wanted to announce the news to our parents and family in a special way. You guessed it. We created envelopes with messages like, "Congratulations, you're going to be a grandfather," or "Congratulations, you're going to be an aunt." We had everyone open these letters simultaneously on Christmas Eve. It was beautiful, and the emotions were exactly as I had seen them in my visualizations months earlier. Moreover, my girlfriend and I had never made the connection with the visualizations I had done earlier. This realization came later. But how could this happen? Why did this manifest in this way, seemingly out of nowhere? If visualizations can indeed bring experiences into our lives, and if the law of attraction really works, then what determines what comes true as you wished and what doesn't? And why was I allowed to experience the real emotions this time? As I had already experienced in the visualization, but the opposite during my Porsche experience. It was exceptionally frustrating because the last thing you want is to attract negativity and problems into your life. However, I wouldn't stop experimenting. I had to master the law of attraction. What always bothered me was that many successful people who talked about it seemed to present this theory so easily. But as soon as the sale of a product became more important than the message behind it, my interest disappeared like snow in the sun. I've never been a fan of advertising messages or typical sales behavior, and unfortunately, that aspect began to emerge more and more in the spiritual world. If something makes me doubt the sincerity of the message and the integrity of the speaker, I quickly lose interest. For that reason, I started searching for the answers I was looking for, mainly by trying things out and experiencing them. Something was missing in the law of attraction, and I wanted to discover that missing element, the real secret behind this peculiar theory that had caught my attention and already influenced my life so much. In the months that followed, it became an obsession and a personal goal for me to find scientific evidence for this mysterious attraction. To this day, this theory is still not fully understood. I wanted to know the difference between following certain steps as a result of indoctrination, as in the case of the Porsche, or whether I had actually attracted certain events in my life through my thoughts and beliefs. It was a quest for deeper insights and a better understanding of how this power really worked. Before we move on to the next chapter, I'd like to emphasize that my intention in writing this book has never been to be seen as a spiritual guru, nor to present my words as the ultimate truth. I speak from my heart and simply share my personal vision and experiences combined with the universal manifestation theory I have written. It is not my intention to force anyone to embrace or accept my ideas. That is the free will we all possess and should never surrender to anyone. I deeply respect individuals' freedom to form and cherish their own beliefs without any form of coercion or indoctrination, and so should everyone. When an idea is imposed, it often has a counterproductive effect, and it's unfortunate that not everyone realizes this. Anything you try to force in life leads to a backlash. What you will read in this book is based on my own life experiences, in-depth research, and the challenges I have encountered and overcome. I am just an ordinary person sharing my story because it feels right, nothing more. My words are not absolute dogma, but rather a personal perspective on life. I am ambitious, I am driven, I want to bring about change, but at the end of the day, I just want to be myself at all times.